Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Build Challenge. This is episode number 4, and this is going to be a one-off, single episode build challenge, so stay tuned. We're going to complete this little map here in one episode, and I got a lot I got to say about it. I think I got a lot to say about it. This is the Mid-Atlantic and Western track plan. This is track plan number 9 from, let me look at my magazine here. This is, I think, 102 realistic track plans by Model Railroaders. This is track plan number 9. And, you know, I had a little bit of free time after the last P&B episode, and I wanted to do something a little bit different. I needed a break from the normal P&B builds. I don't have the main central to work on. I needed a little change of scenery, so I figured I would do some sort of small diorama sort of thing. So I began to think, all right, let me do a build challenge of some kind, because build challenge allows me to just kind of do whatever I'm feeling like doing and challenge myself and sort of build like a diorama, so to speak. So I started thinking about, what do I want to do? What do I have? And I had this track plan actually from, what was it, my 1-year anniversary live stream. This was one of the 3 track plans that we were going to work on. So I already had this one imported in base maps, which, by the way, thank you to Southern 1581 for doing the base map for me, because my computer was not working on it at all, and he put those together for me. But anyway, I already had this ported into Trainz New Era, so I didn't have anything else that I had to do. I could just open it up and just start banging it out. So this is where we're at. This is going to be a small build, and again, this is another transition era sort of style build. So not all the build challenges are going to be transition era, but I thought this was kind of a cool looking track plan. I like the idea of having sort of a switch puzzle and in a downtown scene. I always like these downtown scenes. But, oh, you know what? I haven't even mentioned what the challenge is. What's the challenge, Mr. Approach Medium? Mr. Medium, you guys have been calling me lately, which has kind of got me cracking up. What is the challenge? So it's not just to do another small diorama or to do some kind of another transition era type build. The challenge here is going to be built-in content. If you couldn't tell already from the title of this video, I'm exclusively using built-in content and some download station content. It ends up being a little bit more on the download station side, but essentially everything that I use here is going to be available, should be available right through the download station without any problem. Hopefully there's no missing assets. As far as I can tell in Content Manager, everything that I used is available on the download station or was built in. And again, this is for Trainz New Era, whatever the latest service pack is at the time of this recording, service pack 2, hotfix 1 or 2 or whatever, wherever we're at with that. So anyway, with that in mind, now that I got that out of the way in this really long tangent-y type intro here, I'm sorry, I'm recording this at 5 in the morning, so my head is not totally with it yet. So getting into what we're doing here exactly, I thought the first thing that I thought I would try to use is the Trainz New Era built-in procedural track. I've never used this stuff before, and I figured, hey, what the heck? This is a good opportunity for me to just play with it and see how I like it or I don't like it. And, you know, it's pretty neat. I like the idea of it. I would love to see some more of this procedural track because it adds the frogs and it adds the switch points and stuff like that. So it does look pretty good. As far as performance goes, I'm not sure on a larger scale. I didn't notice it affect my performance too much during this video, but and some of the cinematics that you're about to see at the end of this, but it seems to be pretty decent. So I really wasn't too mad at that, but I think there's some other procedural track out there. There should be some in development. I'd really like to see a little bit more of it, but the thing is, it tends to be a little bit more high poly, so if you don't have a really good computer, or at least a mildly good computer, it can cause some lag because all those ties are rendered, the rails are rendered, the switch points, all this kind of stuff. So they tend to be a little bit more high poly, but the effect is pretty cool. So I'm glad I did it for this one because it was a good chance for me to test it out. And again, I think this was the built-in track. I'm not sure how many other procedural tracks are out there. But man, I really had a hard time with finding some of these assets that I liked. And I always talk about the download station and how convoluted it could be and how hard it is to actually find some content. And even within the game itself, searching like built-in content proved to be a little bit challenging to find the assets that I wanted because I don't always know what the name of some of these things are. And again, some people name them differently. So, you know, just looking for that switch tower that I just placed down there, it took me a while to actually find an asset that looked halfway decent for that because I was searching tower and I was getting water tower, I was getting city towers, like downtown towers. So I was getting a lot of different stuff, so I wish there was a better way to maybe filter things out or Again, some kind of like a naming scheme that like actually makes sense for everybody. I don't know how you would really do that, but it would be nice to do that. But yeah, finding some of these assets proved to be a little bit difficult. But you know what? That was the challenge. It was to try to work with what I had available, and I wanted to make this easy to get out to you guys like right away without having to put together a content pack and all this kind of stuff. So I wanted to work within these constraints, and it was a really good exercise for me. I put this whole map together in probably about 4 hours or so, give or take a little bit. So I had a free night. My wife was at work. I didn't have anything else going on, so you know, it was a good opportunity for me to sit down and just do something a little bit different, work with some different assets that normally I probably wouldn't be playing around with. So it was a good exercise there, and I did find some cool assets that I think look good. So I guess there's a benefit to that. Trying to think of what else I gotta say about this before I just start commentating on what I'm doing directly in front of the camera. I guess I'll just start commentating on what I'm doing. So after finding some of these assets and slowly picking them out, I did do a little bit of like pre-prepping sort of before I started recording. I did go on the download station and pick out some assets that I knew I wanted to use, such as the track, the roads, the bridges, and a few of the key buildings, and I made a pick list off of that. So you might have noticed that right off the bat in the very beginning that I already had a pick list set up and I already knew what assets I was going to do. That was just to save me time because I didn't want to have to sit down while I was making this video and find other assets that I was looking to use. So to have everything already at my fingertips and have my palette set up, it helped speed things up when I got into recording so that I could just jump in and do the build. And I think the hardest part is the part that I struggled with the most was the part that you just saw a moment ago, with the terrain and the cold dump track thing, whatever you call it there. One of the issues that I don't like in Trainz, but sometimes I can see where it's beneficial, is when you adjust the terrain height, the whole asset goes up and down with it, as opposed to just staying where you set it. So this is kind of problematic with something that is connected to the track. So you adjust the terrain around that, and then the asset drops and you end up with like a ridge in the track, or like, you know, something kind of weird like that. So there was a bit of a jump cut way back where I skipped over a lot of that because I was struggling with it and it was just a real pain. So I cut that out. I figured it's not important. That's not part of the build. So that was that. Now we're finally getting into putting down some buildings. I got the track arrangements pretty much laid out. So now I'm trying to find these buildings, and it got like I was trying to figure out how I'm gonna fit some of these buildings in here because, again, as a track plan for an actual HO scale model railroad, you can kit bash buildings and custom build them and custom shape them to meet your needs. We don't really have too much of that ability in Trainz. Like, you can kind of clip buildings together and make new building shapes and stuff like that, which is kind of what I'm doing here. I'm using this angled building with a loading dock. But still, like, I couldn't fit it exactly in the shape that I wanted to. And that was pretty much the best that I could come up with. And again, with some of these background buildings, you have to try to squeeze them in the way that makes sense to the track plan and the background without, you know, making them look like they're too clipped into each other and a little bit too wonky. So one of the challenges with this track plan was these two tracks here that are going off of the backdrop or through the backdrop, which you'll see in a moment. I couldn't come up with a really good solution on the fly to adjust it and make it so that it doesn't just go right into the backdrop, and you'll see it pretty much like right here. So the tracks just go right into this big blue-white backdrop. That's the best that I could come up with. Again, I wasn't trying to spend a whole lot of time troubleshooting things for this map. I wanted to just build it and do like a diorama. So I just let it go. You guys can play with it and modify it however you please. That's all I wanted to do with this, was just get some of these buildings down and detail something and just make some nice looking scenes just for fun, just as an exercise. So going forward, I liked the idea of this downtown scene here. I'm always kind of fascinated by these like girder bridges that go between the buildings, and I don't know if that comes from living down in New York City for as long as I did and seeing some of that with the subways going like right up the middle of the roads on the elevated tracks, and that sort of thing. But to have like a freight operation that just coasts between these buildings on like an elevated section of track, I think it's just like so cool. And I'd like to expand upon this idea a little bit more and maybe bring that idea into some of my other builds, because it's pretty neat. I want to point out here the texture that I found for the right around the coal dump area there. It's like a cobblestone sort of texture. I really like that. That was one of these built-in ones. I think it was built-in. That just really fit the bill for me. It fits into that location perfectly, and it's just as I would imagine in a 1940s sort of scene where, you know, they weren't paving the roads so much yet. There was still a lot of cobblestone roads and that sort of thing, and this is sort of like a rundown, not a rundown area. This is like a downtown scene where they're not going to spend the extra money to do that. You know, they're going to have cobblestone streets. So I like the way that asset looked, and it blends really nicely with some of this other stuff. So I just wanted to point that out. No, we're not even looking at it anymore, but just put that into your mental bank there to take a note of that. Finally getting into some of these details here, the ground textures and the grasses and stuff like that, which I actually had a bit of trouble trying to pick out some stuff. I was really tempted to just go to my pick list with all the shrubs and grasses that I use on the P&B and other stuff, but I'm like, you know what? I gotta pick out some new stuff. This is, you know, I have to use some things that I'm not always using all the time. I did use some of the shrubs that I normally use because I was just starting to get really frustrated to find something that was good and built in. And on the download station, I really just had a hard time finding scenery that was named anything that made any sense at all. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. So I stuck with what I could find. I went through the assets, and I picked a few out, threw them into the pick list. I did go into my normal pick list with vegetation and pick a few things out. But there's that texture there on the bottom left, the cobblestone texture that I like. So yeah, you know, just trying to pick out some of the vegetation. I didn't want to go too crazy with the vegetation because this is supposed to be a downtown scene, so I figured some, you know, kind of scrubby grass and some shrubs, a couple of sparse trees and stuff like that should be just enough to get the effect across. So we don't have to do anything crazy. This is not like a seaport. This isn't in the woods like the B&B or anything like that. So just some trackside overgrowth is really all we needed for that. So what you'll see in a few moments, if you haven't put this together already, this is a model railroad style. It is a model railroad track plan, obviously, but I did do this in the model railroad style where I do add a fascia and clip out the bottom and stuff like that. I did that off camera because that wasn't really part of the build, but I'm just letting you know why I'm kind of like ending the scenes right at the edge, or ending them kind of with an edge that you can't see yet. Because I did that at the end. I did all this, the modeling, and I built all the scenes and stuff like that, and then I went through and did the dig holes and all that kind of nonsense. So all you're gonna see in this video is just the build part of it, the actual detailing and stuff like that. And I liked doing this scene right here because, again, with the way that the girder bridge is there, and these like sort of Brooklyn style downtown type buildings, I wanted to add some more details. I really did. Some more like newspapers and garbage and stuff on the street and stuff like that, but I didn't want to go too crazy because I don't think that the scenes were really super dank like that back in the 40s and 50s. So I didn't want to make it look too messy and too disgusting because I don't think that's how it really is. Like any photos that I've ever seen from that era, that period, tend to be a little bit more clean looking and not so trashy like you see today. So I refrained from doing that, and again, I just wanted to keep this sort of simple, get sort of the effect out, and just use some different assets and that sort of deal. So that was my goal with this build. And I'm coming up maybe another couple minutes here on the time lapse, but I'm gonna cut out for now, and I'm gonna meet up with you guys in just a moment. We're gonna look at some cinematics here and the last couple things, and I'll tell you about how you can get this build. Alright dudes, just a couple more things to talk about before we take a look at some cinematics here. I want to show you this track. Let's zoom in a little tiny bit. So this is a close-up of the track. If you haven't used the procedural track before, now is your chance to take a look at it. It's pretty cool, I think. Again, it does add the frogs and the switch points. It does have higher detail, so you need to have a slightly better performing computer to do a lot of stuff with this. And I noticed that some of the level of detail disappears when you zoom out. Particularly, it's a problem when you do big yards and stuff like that. But one of the things that I do like with this procedural track is how it connects the ties. It's a little glitchy here for some reason, maybe because it's going all the way across. But when you have a junction, it'll actually figure out what ties should be connected together. And, you know, I really like that because that's kind of what they do in the real railroads. Like, you end up with these ties that are not perfectly parallel with each other, but they fit all the way across. So I really like that detail, and I'd like to see a little bit more of it. Next thing I'd like to address is the backdrop situation here. And there's two things to note about the backdrop, and I noted the first one during the time lapse, and that's just how these tracks disappear into the backdrop. We have kind of a cut-off industry here, and the tracks just sort of appear, or trains will just appear on the tracks through the wall. There's a couple things I could have done to address this if I wanted to take the time for it, but that wasn't exactly what I was going for with this build. One of which would be to extend the backdrop just down this way a little tiny bit and add a bridge over here to conceal where the tracks disappeared into the backdrop, so this would all be opened up. But I didn't want to have to think about what kind of stuff was going to fill in that area, so I wanted to just stick with the track plan so I could just detail and just have some fun. Same thing with this area over here. Maybe another building or a building oriented a little bit differently could have addressed that and hit it a little bit more. I'm not too sure what I could have done here. Maybe totally changed the orientation of the track altogether to keep that industry all the way on the layout instead of clipping into the rear wall. But you guys, you can feel free to play with that and see what you can come up with. Another thing to note is you can't really see it too much now, but during the time lapse, some of the whites were just like super white, way overexposed. And I'm not too sure why that is. I played around with the lighting settings a little tiny bit to try to fix that. You can see it on the roof of these cars here. These whites are just way overexposed, way blown out. So I don't really know what the story is with that. I'm not very good with lighting settings in this game. It's not very like user-friendly for me for some reason, so I kind of just left it as it is. But you guys can feel free to mess around with that. And I think the last thing is the staging. I did add some staging tracks here, which we will see back here. So we have a loop, dual loops. Of course, one of these tracks is cutting through the buildings, but not a big deal because you're not going to see it. But I do have three or four tracks here. This is a portal in one direction and a portal in the other direction. So you could bring new trains onto the layout and get old ones off. And this will allow you to do a continuous run. So I did have two trains going in opposite directions on a continuous loop going at any given time. So that is an option for you to do. And I think that's going to do it for the commentary for this portion of the video. So let's take a look at some cinematics. So I just want to let you guys know that I'm going to let this route loose on the download station for free for everybody to download and do what you want with. So what that means is you can modify this, you can turn it into another layout, expand upon it, incorporate it into your own layout, do whatever you want, and feel free to re-upload it. Just I ask that you give me credit as the original creator of the route. If you're new to my channel and you've been enjoying my videos, I highly recommend that you hit the subscribe button and hit that bell icon right next to it to be notified of when I post new videos or go live. If you're a returning subscriber and you'd like to help support my channel, there are three things that you can do, and the first is the most easiest, and that is to hit the like button and hit the share button. The second, if you're interested in buying Trainz A New Era, Trainz Model Railroad, or any other Trainz product, use the link in the description below where it says Get Trainz. And the final way you could support my channel is the most direct method, and that is to send a donation directly to me. Thank you guys once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.